thing that made me start weightlifting was I have two older brothers that weightlift. They are sort of 3 and 4 years older than me. They started going early. They wanted to be bodybuilders, but my dad was basically said, you know, you're too young to become a bodybuilder at the ages of sort of 9 and 10. So, like gymnastics, he had a little bit of a background in Olympic weightlifting, so he said, go and try this. So they went to the only gym that he knew about. They didn't really have proper coaching back then, to be honest. But I went with them and was watching them lift. Obviously, I was too young to stay at home on my own when my dad and my mum went to drop them off. So I went with them, watched, and I really wanted to get involved. It looked like fun, even though they never made it look like fun. But I really enjoyed watching, but I was obviously too young. I was watching them at sort of the age of 7 and 8, and then at about the age of sort of mid-range through being 8 onwards, we moved to a different gym, which was when I started lifting. When I first started, I didn't have any inspiration. I didn't know anything about the sport. I didn't know any of the main big lifters there are today. So I didn't have any inspiration in the way of an actual person like an idol, but I did have a passion for the sport as soon as I started it, so that was enough really. My name's Joshua Farghaly, I'm from Manchester and I'm a bike mechanic at Halford. Besides weightlifting, with working and weightlifting is fairly time consuming, so there's not a lot of time for other hobbies. I mean, most people do, you know, a bit of football, a bit of socialising, you know, going out, and just the normal things, but between working almost full time and training, there's not a lot else to be done, so basically my other hobbies are just general bodybuilding. Now, it's a funny story about how that came around. Basically, I was just training as normal, never really, I'd done competitions, but only small, regional competitions, but my brother, who was a little bit older and was better than me, he got called up for Great Britain for trials, and basically he didn't want to be part of it. He wasn't as interested in the sport as I was. He was doing it as a hobby, but didn't want to take it to that next step. But it was already prepaid, and they wanted someone from our gym, so my coach recommended me as a younger lifter, younger than what they were looking for, but had a passion for it and had potential. So I went. Obviously, I got onto the squad, and I've been on it ever since. There's 2 lifts: the snatch and the clean and jerk. The snatch is the technically harder lift. It's a wide grip. You start on the ground. The lift isn't officially started until you pass your knees, and then once you've got it past your knees, you got to drive up in one big motion and get it over your head. You got to stand up straight with it and then wait for the referee to say down, and that's that lift complete. There's only a few things that you can do wrong in the snatch: bent elbows, or just completely missing the lift. There's not much else that you can actually do to fail it, but you need to master the technique, otherwise you won't get anywhere near the sort of weight potential that you're up to. And then you've got the clean and jerk, which is the easier technically, but because of that they expect a higher demand on the weight. So it's a narrow grip, 2-part movement: the clean up to your chest and then the jerk over your head. And you can again, you can fail that the same way as in the snatch, but the difference is your elbows are supposed to come quite near to your knees on the clean, and therefore if your elbows touch your knees, that's considered a fail as well, because it's basically you're supporting your elbows with your knees and it's not allowed. And then a bent elbow on the jerk, it's a fail. You've got first you have to be a member of BALA, which is the British Weightlifting Association. That's the first things first, so you ain't got a shot. You have to enter the competition as well. I've done that a few times, not entered and turned up. I've got away with that a few times, but Les has got me in. For a competition, on a typical competition day, I would get up, I would get a test weigh-in, which is one of the most important things. I'd weigh in on my scales at home, but you've always got to account for the fact that the scales might not be exactly the same. They're 2 completely different scales. Sometimes you get there and their scales are slightly heavy or they're slightly light. Obviously better if they're slightly light, it's a lot easier to make weight. But what you do is you get there, but unlike boxing where you have a couple of days in between your weigh-in and the fight, on the competition day between your weigh-in and your lifts, you've only got a couple of hours tops. So you want to get your body weight as low as possible to get into your weight class, without losing any sort of strength. So crash dieting is not going to work. You need to gradually lose your weight whilst maintaining your strength and your power. And that's in terms of weighing, you need to make your weight for your particular bodyweight class. If you go in the class heavier, as long as you've lifted the qualifying totals for the class above, you're more than welcome to join that class. It's just going to be a harder competition with heavier people. And in terms of the lifts, you've got 3 coaches, 3 referees should I say, centre and right and left. They get all angles of your lift to make sure that you're not doing any of the bent elbows or the elbows touching the knees or just completely failing it. You have all angles covered. You get a minute between the person that's lifted before you. Once the minute they've put the bar down and the weight's been loaded appropriately for you and it calls your name, then your minute starts there. I've represented Great Britain and England as 2 separate organisations, so I've represented Great Britain at the European Youths, the European Juniors and the European Under-23s, all various countries that I've been to representing, and I've represented them at the World Youths as well, and I've represented England, which is a completely separate organisation because you're lifting against other Britain countries such as Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and I represented them in India at the Commonwealth Youth Games. I've won loads. I put all of my first trophies to the front in case you can see them.
When did you first start weightlifting?
60 years ago.
How did you get into it?
I used to train at home with my own weights, and then a friend of mine said to me, "We're going to join a bodybuilding club." So I went down and I trained with them for about 3 months, and I was asked would I like to try and do a snatch, and from there on I did Olympic weightlifting.
Has the technique in weightlifting changed? And
Definitely.
How's it changed?
By the length of the weightlifting bar. It's changed because the weights are made of rubber now and they were made of steel. You have to put the bar down on the platform, else you would smash the platform. It's changed, the rules changed because you're now allowed to take the bar off your thighs. In my day, when I was lifting, the bar couldn't touch any other part of your body. So that is a tremendous thing. It's changed because we trained on 3 lifts. We trained on press, snatch, clean and jerk. Now they only train on 2 lifts. So, hello! Cheerio!
How many times do you train a week?
3 or 4.
And how did you get into coaching weightlifting?
Right, I got told that Manchester Education was willing to start people to teach weightlifting as long as they was qualified. So I took the ball coaches course and referees course. I applied for the job in Manchester Education, which I got, and I stayed there for over 40 years.
And what's been your greatest achievement in the sport?
I would say I trained over 200 British champions.
I never realised until I went onto the Great Britain squad. I mean, when I first went onto it, we didn't have a lot of knowledge of your diet and other things that weren't weightlifting. We used to go and meet and we used to weightlift. We didn't talk about any of the other things like sleep and supplements and things like this, and just general every day-to-day things that happen in your life that can directly affect the way you train. So there's all these little things you learn, like if you're going to watch TV, for example, watch it outside of your bedroom, because if you watch TV in bed, you associate your bed with being awake. Pretty scientific, some of it, and I don't fully understand some of it. Some of it I'm just told to do and I do it, but I didn't realise I thought it was all weightlifting. I didn't understand that weightlifting was probably the smallest part of it. It's one of the least important parts, the actual training. Everything else, the foundation is the key, basically. Basically, what I've been told is I started off it was a tight shoulder, and because my shoulder was pushed forward and was tight, that was forcing my elbow to basically be in the wrong position, and because my elbow was in the wrong position, it caused my wrist to be in the wrong position, and that's where all the weight goes onto your wrist. So it was a chain reaction of loads of things all down the right side of my body because I'm right-handed. I think it was just a gradual build-up of tensed muscles and not enough stretching, which caused the whole thing. When you look at it now, it seems like something that's really easily avoidable, but 10 years after I started, I'm not doing any significant stretching or consistent stretching. That's what caused a massive problem. I injured my wrist. It's a funny story because it wasn't one particular injury. It wasn't I dropped a weight on it that it's injured. It was just gradual. Lot of hard training over the years, and possibly what my coach keeps telling me was a lack of flexibility and commitment to flexibility and stretching, which I think he's quite right. He told me when I was 9 that it would come back to haunt me in my later years, and he was right. Although I wasn't buying it when I was 9 and 10, but now I'm starting to believe it, and I've got on top of it a bit more now, and I'm doing more flexibility. At first, I chose to ignore it. It was a minor hindrance in my training at first because it wasn't too bad, but obviously it just got worse and worse to the point where I couldn't finish particular lifts and I couldn't do particular movements, and that's when it got to a real problem where I went to see, I saw the physio first, who thought that it was just a bit of swelling, a bit of just needed a bit of ibuprofen or something pretty simple. Just needed to do some small stretches. Eventually, I went to see it. I had an MRI scan, which is when they found that there was other things going on, which I'm not entirely sure what it was, but I had scar tissue and things like that. At first, they thought that I'd been in a fight. They didn't believe that I'd injured my hand and my wrist, because apparently the most common, when a teenager comes into the doctors, the most common cause of it is being in a fight, and they often have excuses as to why it was. But I was being genuine. I said it was a weightlifting accident. They didn't believe me, but obviously I could tell they didn't believe me. But they saw me anyway, and I think what they did was they just gave me the most general, take some ibuprofen, put some ice on it, which is a pretty good general way of dealing with something that's pretty minor. But obviously this is a long-term injury, and it takes a little bit more than that to solve. I saw the Great Britain doctor as well, and he first gave me a cortisone injection, which is like a steroid-based injection, which is supposed to numb the pain and allow for it to heal whilst being pain-free. It lasted about a week, and it was killing again. And then that's when I had the MRI scan, and then they did the cortisone again, but I think it was a bit more effective the second time round, and now it's on the mend. I'd say I'd never stopped fully training. I did the core exercises, the squats and the deadlifts and other exercises that didn't hurt. I was probably out from Olympic weightlifting for about 6 months. My wrist now isn't fully healed, but it is on the mend. Doing all the stretching and flexibility exercises is really helping. You're doing some core exercises, building up the muscles that support the wrist. To represent Great Britain at the Olympics was the highest achievement in weightlifting. It would just be the ultimate goal for any weightlifter. It's the biggest competition in the world, and it means pretty much everything.